Wall Street ends mixed as Dow Jones slips and S&P 500 and Nasdaq end at record highs following US-Vietnam trade deal and weak ADP jobs report. 10-year Treasury yield jumps to the highest level in about a week. Asian markets open mixed as investors assess the trade deal announced between US and Vietnam. The GIFT Nifty is indicating a slightly positive start for the Indian market. Crude oil prices rise 3% as Iran suspends the cooperation with the UN nuclear watchdog and the US-Vietnam reach a trade deal. Gold prices too rise as weak private payrolls data strengthens rate cuts bet. US President Donald Trump announces a trade deal with Vietnam. The agreement includes 20% US tariff on Vietnamese goods as well as 40% transshipping tariff. The Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas has raised objections to Vedanta's proposed demerger during a hearing before the NCLT. The legal representative from the ministry requested additional time to present their observations on the scheme at the next hearing on 20th of August. Hello, good morning. You've tuned into CNBC-TV18 and you're watching Power Breakfast with me, Vinny Motiwala. A week where we've seen a bit of consolidation coming in for the Indian markets. Today will be important to watch out for, given that it's the Nifty weekly expiry as well as the Asian markets. They've opened up a bit mixed, more on the subdued or the negative side is what we're watching out for. Taiwan index is the one that's managing to hold on to strong gains of 0.8%, but Hang Seng, that's down in trade. We're seeing investors being more cautious and assessing the US-Vietnam trade deal, how it will work out for them as well. Japan and US trade deal right now is at a bit of a halt. They are in talks, but that will be important to watch out for. India trade deal, that's what we're keeping an eye out on. As of now, today, ASX 200, that's opened up in the red. Nikkei is trading muted and more on the red side as well. So that is something to watch out for. Taiwan index is the only one managing to hold on to gains. Nifty implied open for the Indian markets. A muted start is what we're watching out for. Slight bit of a positive bias. In the morning, it was up 25 points. The Nifty implied open. Now it's up 35 points. Important to see how we'll be reacting to that as well. But how did the US markets close in yesterday's trading session? Most of them mostly ended higher on Wednesday's trading session. S&P 500 and Nasdaq closing at record high levels following the trade deal that came in with Vietnam, as well as there was a weak private payroll data as well. So a bit of a mixed closing is what we saw for the US markets. But for a wrap on what happened on Wall Street, we have CNBC's Angelica Peebles joining in with us to just give us that. Angelica.
U.S. markets were mixed on Wednesday after investor optimism for a U.S. trade agreement with Vietnam was tempered by data showing private hiring fell unexpectedly in June. The Dow shedding 11, the S&P 500 gaining 29, and the tech-heavy Nasdaq up 190. President Trump announced on Wednesday that the U.S. has reached the framework of a trade deal with Vietnam. Details of the deal were only posted on Trump's Truth Social platform, but include a 20% tariff on Vietnamese imports to the U.S. and a 40% transshipping tariff for goods that originated in another country and then transferred to Vietnam for final shipment to the U.S. The announcement comes less than a week before a 90-day pause on the president's so-called reciprocal tariffs was set to expire. The latest payroll report from ADP showed the private sector lost 33,000 jobs last month. Today's report badly missing analyst expectations for an increase of 100,000 jobs and marking the first monthly decline since March 2023. ADP cited a hesitance among employers to hire workers and a reluctance to replace employees who left their roles. But the report doesn't always indicate the direction of the job market. The government's non-farm payrolls report will provide a better picture of the broader market when it comes out tomorrow. That's what's happening here in the U.S. Back to you in Mumbai.
Thank you so much for that. But let's also hear in some opinions that have come in from Wells Fargo's Scott Wren on where U.S. market is headed now and what we should be expecting.
We think the market's come, it's come a long way. Stocks are rich right now. We're trying to trim back. If you look at consumer discretionary sector, industrial sectors, those have done pretty well lately. We're taking money out of there. And to be honest with you, clients are either holding some cash because we think there's going to be a pullback here. We want to stick with quality bonds, 3 to 7 year intermediate part of the curve. We want to stick with large cap U.S. stocks, S&P 500. We also like U.S. mid caps. We don't want to be over overexposed to the emerging markets or really developed international either. So quality, if you want to sum up what we're trying to do right now portfolio-wise, it's quality. You want to be patient. We think there's going to be a pullback, and you need to be ready to step in if a pullback should occur.
Some more updates that are coming in from the United States. President Donald Trump he's announced that he had struck a trade deal with Vietnam under which the country would face a minimum 20% tariff and opens its markets to U.S. products. The deal comes less than a week before Trump's self-imposed July 9th deadline for steeper tariffs on U.S. trade partners to take effect if agreements are not reached. The U.S. president also said and would also be meeting with a faction of conservative lawmakers at the White House who have threatened to sink his signature tax legislation over its $3.4 trillion price tag as lawmakers cast doubt on whether it can be passed by July 4th. Now, that's all the global market action that we have for you all this morning. How is all this going to be impacting our Indian markets? We have a team of research joining in with us to tell you what are the stocks to watch out for, set you up for trade, what's going to be happening in the world of F&O as well. First up, Hormaz is here to tell us what are the market cues we are watching out for today. Hormaz, obviously we've seen a deal coming in with US and Vietnam, but how is the Indian market expected to react to this? A lot of numbers that we are seeing in terms of Q1 updates as well that we will be reacting to.
Morning, Vinny. And the way they look at the market is completely subject to what side of the spectrum you are on. Because if you are a bear, you would say, okay, you're down 200 points in the last 3 trading sessions. If you are a bull, you would say, okay, we tested the lows of the day yesterday, but we recovered almost 80 points from that despite ending lower. So it's both sides. If you take a look at that, and it was the Nifty Bank that was the underperformance of the banking index that dragged the Nifty lower yesterday, predominantly because of the PSU Bank Index, which snapped a 6-day winning streak yesterday, and that took the bank Nifty lower in yesterday's trading session. Of course, the broader markets had a very volatile trading session. They recovered from the lows, then fell to the lows again, and then eventually ended up recovering as well. But the advanced decline ratio was firmly in favor of the declines in yesterday's trading session. And it was the metals index, though. Most of the other sectoral indices were underperforming. It was the metals index that bucked the trend over some developments that took place in China. That was the top sectoral performer yesterday. And an important session lies ahead today because, of course, it's the weekly expiry for the Nifty contracts. The Vietnam deal that you spoke about, that will keep a lot of these apparel makers in focus as well. The subject to what happens to our negotiations now going forward. The spotlight will be on that even further. And, of course, as you mentioned, there are multiple business updates that we'll be reacting to today. And the US market shut early today as a slew of macro data reported later this evening. So that will have a reaction tomorrow as well. Among the key levels, of course, yesterday's low remains the key for the Nifty 25,378, and of course it's struggling to cross that 25,600 band on the upside. So it's that 200-250 point range that the Nifty remains stuck in for now. At least for now, the GIFT Nifty is indicating a positive start for our own markets.
Okay, as of now, a positive start for our own markets is what we're watching out for. But which are the stocks that you should be keeping on your radar today? We have Upasna joining in with us to give us that list. Good morning, Upasna.
Good morning, Vinny. Lots of stocks on our radar on the back of Q1 updates. First up is M&M Finance. Overall, it's been a weak update. The disbursement growth stood at just about 1% on a one-year basis, and collection efficiency stood at 95%, dipped sequentially. Indian Bank also in focus. The total business is up about 10% on a one-year basis, and total deposits also saw growth of 9.3%. So overall, it's been a good update. PNB Bank also in focus as domestic business is up about 1.5% sequentially and 11% on a one-year basis, and deposits have also seen a growth of about 1.7% sequentially and 12% on a one-year basis. So overall, it's been a steady update. V2 Retail also came up with its Q1 update. It's a strong update, revenue up 51%. Same store sales growth for the quarter stood at about 5%. Hindustan Zinc also came up with its Q1 production numbers. The mine metal production stood at 2,605,000 tons with an uptick of just about 1% on a one-year basis. Vedanta also in focus as the demerger hearing is delayed. The NCLT to resume hearing on August 20th. Now, the legal representative from the Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas has requested additional time to present their observations on the scheme on the next hearing. which is why the hearing is delayed to 20th of August. Now, lastly, on Nykaa, according to sources, Hardinpur, Singal Banga and Indra Banga is likely to sell nearly about 2.1% of their stake via equity block deals. Now, the block size is around 1200 crores and floor price for the deal is likely to be set around 200 rupees per share. So, all in all these stocks likely to win focus.
Okay, Upasana, thank you so much for that. But Mangalam is here to tell us what should we be watching out for in the world of F&O. Today we do have the weekly expiry as well, Mangalam, and a week of bit of consolidation that we've seen so far. So what are we watching out for today now?
The market has been biding time, and today's weekly options expiry. My sense is that this one will go to the bulls. Why do I say that? Because, you know, yesterday there was weakness on the Lal Street, but remember, the GIFT Nifty is indicating a positive start, and from lows yesterday, the Nifty actually rallied about 80 points as well. So we've tested recent lows of 25,280, there was 25,473, and then yesterday was 25,378. Now the question is, can we test recent highs? Remember, the highs on the Nifty on June 27th and the first day of the series, July series, 25,669, remain to be watched. Remember, FII sold about 1,500 crores in cash markets yesterday, but that was more than bought over by the DIs at 3,000 crore of inflows. There were some shorts added by FIIs in index futures. Remember, they've been adding a couple of long positions. So 38% was their net long position earlier. Now that's fallen to 33%. They added 6,800 short contracts and unwound around 3,700 long contracts. That's positive because if they do not get follow through, and as the GIFT Nifty is indicating a positive start, we will obviously see them running for cover out there. And similar is the case for options as well. Yesterday, some of those short put writers had to close their positions out, and a lot of short call writers have come in ahead of expiry. Remember, the put call ratio has fallen from peak of 1.25, 1.28 now to close to 0.78, which is at the lower end of the range. So the market has tested the lower range. Now the question is whether it can go ahead and test the higher end of the range, and my sense is today could perhaps be that day. The 25,400 call writers, very active, premium at 99 rupees. 25,500 call writers as well, equally active, premium at 50 rupees, telling you that if the Nifty sustains about 25,500 and crosses past 25,550, there could be a further rally because these call writers will have to cover their positions. But the question is whether we hold on to yesterday's lows or not, and that's where put writers believe that we will, because there is 25,450 puts which have seen a fair amount of writing, premium of 65. So around 25,400 is important support.
Okay, keep an eye on the support levels over there as well. So thank you so much for that, Mangalam. On that note, we're going to actually slip into a very short break, and we get you excerpts from an exclusive interaction with Telecom Minister Jyotiraditya Scindia. Stay tuned in for that. Welcome back. Thanks for staying tuned to Power Breakfast on CNBC-TV18. Now, Telecom Minister Scindia has ruled out any increase in the government's stake in Vodafone Idea. Speaking to Parikshit Luthra, Scindia made it clear that the government has no intention to make Vodafone Idea a public sector unit. The minister also confirmed that the Telecom department is evaluating Bharti Airtel's proposal to convert spectrum dues to equity similar to Vodafone Idea. Listen to what more he had to say.
When it comes to further equity conversion, I think you've said earlier also that it's not as possible.
There cannot be. There possibly cannot be further equity conversion unless the government's share gets diluted to lower than 49% to enable us to increase it back to 49%. Because we can't increase it beyond 49%, because the minute you do that, then it becomes a PSU, which is not our intent.
But are there other options being considered?
At this point of time, the equity option, increasing the equity option is not an option. As far as other options are concerned, there's not much discussion happening at this point. If there is, we will let you know.
Analysts have said that 2-year deferment of Vodafone AGR dues is the most possible thing that the government could do.
That is, as I said to you again, that is not for us to decide. That is for the management of the company to decide.
Right. Now, also,
I do not happen to be the CEO of Vodafone, and neither do I happen to be the CEO of BSNL.
Let me also ask you about Bharti Airtel. Now, Bharti Airtel has also applied and made an application to you for equity conversion. The government seems to be considering this. What's your view right now? Has a call been taken?
The Department of Telecommunications is evaluating it. Once they evaluate it and they bring it up to me, then I shall exercise a view based on the analysis that has been done. At this point of time, they have not brought it up to me.
You've met representatives of Starlinks over the last few months. They've got one approval from the government. InSpace is waiting for them to respond to their draft, and they may give an approval soon. But finally, how long would it take to clear the decks for them to operate in India?
Well, I think that the process is on. They have to get permission for their satellite Earth gateways to be located in India. They've got to get InSpace permission. They've got to get security clearance. And then they have to get spectrum. These are the major 4 milestones, if you will, to be able to operate in India. I am of the opinion that the sooner my SATCOM companies operate, and by that reference I mean not only Starlink, whether it's OneWeb or it is Reliance Jio, I'd like them to offer services as soon as possible in as many areas as possible, so that there is a fair degree of competition for those that are not connected. And I see that happening, as I said, in the next couple of months. This process should get ironed out.
Okay, that's an interesting conversation there. But on that note, we're going to actually slip into a very short break. But up next, we'll come back and we'll talk to you about what's happening in the world of commodities. So stay tuned in for that. Welcome back to Power Breakfast on CNBC-TV18. Now, US President Donald Trump has hinted at reaching a potential trade deal with India, claiming it's going to be a different kind of deal. This comes amid the hectic negotiations between India and US. The India's top negotiator extending his stay in Washington. Both sides are at a stalemate on a contentious agri and dairy sectors. Now, here is former RBI Governor Raghuram Rajan on the sticking points that are hindering an agreement right now. Listen to what he's saying.
First, there are easy sort of wins. India can buy more natural gas from the United States, which has a surplus of that. It will require sort of positioning Indian purchases. But there's sort of politically difficult places that India doesn't want to go. For example, agriculture, dairy products. Indian dairy farmers, it's a huge source of living, and they don't want to be swamped by cheap U.S. dairy products. So in that sense, there will be some red areas that India will not want to go to, but there are many other areas where I think agreements can be reached. There are other sources of oil nearer India than the United States. But certainly, as far as natural gas goes, LNG is something that India has increasingly used. And as it transitions to cleaner sources of energy, LNG may be the transition sort of energy source. So it is sort of win-win if India buys more of that, and certainly the U.S. has a surplus.
We also spoke to Atul Keshav, the president of a US and India Business Council, on the likelihood of a trade deal before the 9th of July deadline. And here is what he had to say.
The U.S. Chamber, the U.S.-India Business Council, all of our members want to see this deal happen. It's very important for the United States and India, the two greatest democracies on earth, to have such a deal. I understand the trade negotiators are in town and working away. Secretary Bessent said the other day that a deal with India is very, very close, and we are cheering wholeheartedly for this deal to happen. Chamber's view, ideologically and theologically even, is that zero tariffs are the best for ensuring the greatest amount of prosperity and happiness and consumer choice. And so we've been on the record many times about that. You know, if we can get to a point where we have the minimal amount of tariffs between the United States and India, where we also have the minimum amount of non-tariff barriers, because it's not enough simply to reduce your tariffs. You have to be sincere about reducing all kinds of government machinery and bureaucracy and regulations and red tape that would impede the movement of goods despite having a low tariff regime. It is also true that the Indian agricultural sector not only employs an enormous proportion of the population of India, but also represents an increasingly smaller proportion of the GDP of India. And if you contrast that with agriculture in Brazil or in America or in other places around the world, you know, India hasn't had the waves of modernization that other countries have had. In a way, if India were to look at this as an opportunity to inject a measure of innovation into its agricultural economy in a way that can actually catalyze growth of revenue, economic growth, help people transition into higher skilled jobs, it could actually be viewed as a positive.
On that note, let's talk about what's happening in the world of commodities this morning. And we have Manisha Gupta joining in with us to give us that wrap. Good morning, Manisha. What are we keeping an eye out on today?
Well, I'm looking at the crude oil prices because we've seen 3% of gains in the overnight market, and not just crude oil. Heating oil gained up by 3.5%. Natural gas was up 2% as well. This is after Iran suspends cooperation with the United Nations, saying that future inspection of nuclear sites by IAEA will only need approval from Tehran's Supreme National Security Council. So clearly this brings in a bit of a concern into the markets, and we've seen that premium come back. Also, while you're looking at the US-Vietnam strike trade deal agreement, that gives in some positivity as well in sense of demand. And now the US jobs data is something that would be in focus. Further cues would come in from that. But it's not just the crude oil prices. If you look at precious metals, base metals, everything is trading in positive. Platinum gained 4.5% overnight. Palladium was 5%. Gold gained 1%. In metals, you had the ferrous metals running the most. 2 to 3% of gains for steel and iron ore prices is what we are dealing with. And the gains have just about continued when it comes to copper. That one is trading at a new 3-month highs in the Asian markets right now. This is after a strong manufacturing data coming in from China.
Okay, Manisha, thank you so much for that. Surely we'll be keeping an eye out on crude, natural gas, as well as metals in the trading session and how they move going forward as well. But with that, we're absolutely out of time on this edition of Power Breakfast on CNBC TV 18. Thank you so much for tuning in. Up next, your Bazaar Morning Call.